letter was there when Elena entered the kitchen, though she had no memory of placing it on the table. A plain white envelope, the paper slightly yellowed at the edges, as if it had been waiting. She poured herself a cup of coffee, pushing away the lingering weight of another sleepless night. The apartment was too quiet, the kind of silence that stretched into something unnatural. Only when she sat down did she glance at the envelope. Her name was written in ink she recognized too well. A chill crawled up her spine as she traced the handwriting, her mother's handwriting. Eleanor's breath hitched. Her mother had been dead for 6 months. Her fingers trembled as she tore the envelope open. My dearest Eleanor, I know you don't believe this is real, but you must listen to me. Time is running out, and you cannot ignore the signs. Stay away from the blue house on the old road. The words swam in her vision. Her hands clenched around the letter, the parchment crinkling under her grip. She exhaled sharply. Number this was impossible. Maybe someone was playing a cruel joke. Maybe a knock on the door made her jump. Heart pounding, she turned her head toward the entrance. The letter lay open on the table. The ink, disturbingly fresh, gleamed under the kitchen light. Her mother had been gone for 6 months. And yet, someone had just sent her a letter. The second letter arrived the next morning. Elena found it in the exact same spot as before, on the kitchen table, despite her locking every door and window the night before. Her stomach twisted. With hesitant hands, she unfolded the paper. Tonight, at 11:47 p.m., a man in a grey suit will knock on your door. Do not answer. He is not who he appears to be. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. She shoved the letter into a drawer, forcing herself to breathe. It's a prank. It has to be. But as the hours bled into the evening, the letter gnawed at her mind. By 11:30 p.m., she was perched on the couch, staring at the front door, her fingers gripping the fabric of her sweater. The apartment was still, the only sound the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. 11:45, 11:46. She swallowed hard. Nothing is going to happen. It's just a coincidence. 11:47. A sharp knock shattered the silence. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Knock, knock, knock. She clamped a hand over her mouth, every nerve screaming for her to stay still. The peephole. She could just... No. The letter had warned her. Seconds stretched into eternity. The knocking stopped. A long, eerie silence followed. Then the faint sound of footsteps. Retreating. Her body remained rigid for minutes after, listening, waiting. When she finally found the courage to move, she peeked through the window. The street was empty, but on her front steps, muddy footprints led away from her door. The next letter came the following afternoon. Elena didn't want to read it, but she did. The mirror in your hallway will crack today at 2:37 p.m. Do not touch the shards. Her hands clenched around the paper. This is ridiculous. And yet, she couldn't ignore the twisting in her gut as the clock inched toward the predicted time. 2:35 p.m. She sat on the couch unmoving, her eyes fixed on the hallway mirror. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting elongated shadows on the wooden floor. 2:36. A deep breath. Nothing will happen. 2:37. The mirror shattered. The sound was deafening, like a gunshot splitting the air. Jagged shards rained onto the floor, glinting in the dim light. Eleanor's breath came in shallow gasps. She approached cautiously, pulse thundering in her ears. The largest shard lay at her feet, and in its fractured surface, she saw something that didn't belong. A shape, a figure standing just behind her. She spun around. Nothing. Her chest rose and fell rapidly as she stepped back, heart slamming against her ribs. Then the phone rang. Once, twice, a third time. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the receiver. She shouldn't have answered, because on the other end, there was no voice, just breathing, slow, hollow, too close. Elena slammed the phone down. Something was very, very wrong, and the letters weren't stopping. Elena needed answers. The letters were coming from somewhere, from someone. She drove to her childhood home, an old 2-story house that had been collecting dust since her mother's death. She hadn't set foot there in months. The air inside was stale, thick with forgotten memories. She moved through the house, each creak of the wooden floorboards echoing in the silence. In her mother's bedroom, she found the old wooden box, the one her mother had always kept locked. The key was still hidden in the same place, under the loose floorboard beneath the vanity. Her hands shook as she turned the key. Inside, stacks of letters lay bundled together. Letters her mother had written to her. She recognized them instantly. When Eleanor was a child, her mother had a habit of writing letters she never sent. For when you need them, she used to say. But as she sifted through the envelopes, dread curled in her stomach. None of them matched the ones she'd been receiving. Whoever was sending the new letters, it wasn't her mother. A cold breeze whispered through the room, though the windows were shut. Then, a soft knock. Not at the front door, at the bedroom door. The hair on the back of her neck rose. She wasn't alone in the house. Eleanor stood frozen. The knock hadn't been loud. It was almost gentle, like the tap of fingertips against wood. She turned slowly toward the bedroom door. It was closed. The hallway beyond it should have been empty. She was alone. Or at least, she had been. The air in the room felt heavier now, charged with something unseen, something watching. Then, from beneath the door, a slip of white paper slid into the room. Another letter. Her pulse roared in her ears as she bent down, hesitating before picking it up. The envelope was cold, as if it had been sitting in ice. She tore it open with unsteady hands. My dearest Eleanor, I tried to protect you, but I have failed. He's already here. He has always been here. Her breath hitched. Then she noticed something at the bottom of the letter. Words smudged, as though written in a trembling hand. In the 13th letter, I will be with you on your final night. At 3:12 a.m., do not look at the window. Her chest tightened as she ran to the desk, counting the envelopes she had received so far. 10, which meant there were still 3 more to come, and one of them would be her last. The floor creaked outside the bedroom. Eleanor didn't move. She wasn't sure she could. Eleanor barely slept. She forced herself to stay awake, counting the hours, waiting for the next letter. Every creak in the apartment made her flinch. Every shadow stretched too far, lingered too long. The 12th letter arrived just after midnight. She found it on her pillow. She hadn't heard anyone enter. With trembling hands, she unfolded the paper. The 13th letter will arrive tonight. You must not run. You must not hide. At 3:12 a.m., do not look at the window. Her throat was dry. Eleanor glanced at the clock. 3 a.m. She turned off every light, sat on the couch, knees drawn to her chest. The apartment was suffocating in its silence. 3:10 a.m. Her breath was too loud. 3:11 a.m. The air shifted, like something unseen pressing against the room. The temperature plummeted. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was so light, she almost convinced herself she imagined it. Tap, tap, tap. A soft knock against the window. Eleanor clenched her hands into fists. Don't look, don't look. Eleanor, She choked on a gasp. It was her mother's voice, right outside the window. The urge to look was unbearable, a weight pressing against her skull. But the letter had warned her. She shut her eyes tight. Outside, something scratched against the glass. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. 3:13 a.m. The knocking stopped. The apartment was silent. Elena exhaled shakily. It was over. And then she saw it, a new envelope resting beside her. The 13th letter. Elena stared at the envelope, her hands refusing to move. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Her skin was cold. She didn't want to open it, but she had no choice. With slow, deliberate movements, she picked up the letter, feeling the weight of it, heavier than the others, as if something unseen pressed against the paper. The ink was smudged, as though written in a shaking hand. "My dearest Elena, I'm so sorry. I thought I could protect you, but I was wrong. He has been here all along, and now he is waiting." Her stomach twisted violently. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Then she noticed something on the back of the envelope, a message she hadn't seen before. "This is not the last letter. There will be a 14th, and it will not come from me." A chill crawled down her spine. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The letter had warned her before. Do not answer the third call. But her body moved on its own. Her fingers curled around the receiver. She lifted it to her ear. Silence. Then, breathing. Slow, hollow, too close. And finally a voice. Her own voice. "Elena, he's already here." The call disconnected. The apartment door creaked open. Eleanor's body locked in place. The front door was open. A sliver of darkness stretched from the hallway into her apartment, a void swallowing the dim glow of the night. She hadn't moved, hadn't touched the lock. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She gripped the 13th letter, its paper crumpling under her trembling fingers. This wasn't supposed to happen. Then, footsteps, software measured, inside the apartment. Eleanor's breath hitched. She backed away slowly, her bare feet soundless against the floor. The apartment light flickered, and then the 14th letter slid across the floor. Her stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't her mother. This wasn't supposed to exist. With shaking hands, she bent down, her vision blurring as she read the single sentence scrawled across the page. "Turn around." The lights went out. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The air shifted behind her, cold, watching. She felt something move, not footsteps, but a presence. Something was there, so close she could feel it breathing. She shut her eyes. "Don't turn around, don't turn around." A whisper brushed against her ear.
"Eleanor."
Her body stiffened. The voice was her mother's, or at least, it sounded like her. And then, a hand touched her shoulder. The world went black.